In the average painting, reflected light can easily be up to 75% of that entire painting. And yet most artists either don't realize this or they don't understand how to paint it. So this is why reflective light is one of the most important topics for you as an artist to understand, because it's one of the largest parts of most paintings, and yet it's one of the least understood concepts in representational art. So if it's left out or painted incorrectly, it can cause a painting to look flat or like something's missing. But if you add that reflective light, you have a much more appealing painting. It just adds that extra kick of reality. So today we're going to dive in deep on this and break down how and what is lighting up different parts of your painting and why color shifts occur in certain areas, all to make it all easier to understand and help you make your paintings the best they possibly can. So let's get going. Okay, so most artists know what reflective light is, or at least they kind of know, but either paint it too bright, or they paint it too colorful, or just ignore it completely. Those are exactly the kinds of misconceptions that can make your paintings look a little flat, or your shadows have no life, or your painting's just not as exciting as the scene that you see right in front of you. And then the artist wonders why my painting isn't looking as beautiful as what I see in front of me, whether it's a photograph or real life. So know that even if you have all the values spot on, you have all the little details perfectly placed, the edges are good, the color harmony is good, but it's still looking a little flat or like something's missing. It could be something as small as the reflective light. Just being added to that painting could make it pop and look complete. Okay, so let's look at this painting of mine. So this is a portrait of my daughter sitting in the sun, but as you see with this, you have sunlight from the window as the only source of light. It's a one light source, and everything else you see here is reflective light. So the light is coming through the window, it's going up her shoulder, it's hitting her face and this side of her hair, coming down here and hitting this arm over here. The couch is being lit up here, back here in a couple spots, and then this back section. As you see, this back chair is lit in this small section. But the rest of this is all reflective light that's glowing just from the sky outside, as well as what's being hit on the inside of that room. So all this was just being lit up by the floor. This is just being lit up, like I said, from that blue sky. And now I want to show you one more thing about reflective light. So all of this, where her arm is lit up, you can see how it's hitting her hand. It's reflecting off this and lighting up this with reflective light. It's hitting the backside, but this is lit up too, but it's only lit up from this part of her cuff of her shirt is lit up from the sun, so it's reflecting back on this part of her forearm. This is all lit up back here from the sun, and then you have reflective light here, probably from the sun here. Now I did embellish some of this just because I like throwing colors in, especially white clothing, and also feel comfortable with doing that. As an artist, we have the artist's right to do whatever we want to make something more appealing or kind of interesting to us. And so I like to throw things in, but the value is still the same. So if you squint your eyes, you can still see that the value matches even though the colors are changing like this. But then it comes up through her shoulder and then down the front of her dress or over to the other side and on her face. And you can see how it hits back here on the couch. and then this side of her hair. Whereas the other side of her hair, you see blue, which was reflecting through the window. Whatever the sun hits, wherever it stops, you still have light coming through that window. And actually, let me see how the dress down here is blue? Because the sun isn't hitting here. If I was sitting down here on this part of her dress, again, that little man sitting right here, if I looked up, I would not see the sun coming through the window. All I would see would be the blue sky, which is very bright because it's that ambient light shining through the window. And that blue sky would light me up, which of course would be blue, like a blue light. So this is lit up blue as well as this side of her hair. And some of the shadow back here has the blue in it also. It's not going to be as strong because of the color that it's hitting. This is white, so that blue sky is going to come out as white. If it's hitting yellow, you will get that more of that greenish purple look. Now, one other thing I wanted to go over, because I think it's important in understanding how this works, how light works, as well as reflective light. In this part, as I zoom in, if you think of yourself as a small person, if I was sitting in this shadowed eye socket, you see how this eye is lit up on the eyelid and eyelashes and so on, but this is in the dark or in the shadow. So you kind of picture yourself as a person, a small person, sitting inside of this eye or on top of this eyelid. And if you were there, it's kind of like this is a cave and this is a side of a cliff. So the sun's hitting the side of the cliff, and in this little cave or cavern, that's where you're sitting to get out of the sun. So if I was sitting here, if I looked up, I would just see this eyebrow and this edge of the eye socket. So I'd be out of the sun, and then as I come closer to the end of this eyelid, things would start getting brighter. And if I stood on the end of these eyelashes, you can see how the sun starts hitting the eyelashes at the very tip, because now if you look up, you can see the sun. So the sun just hits here, goes past and hits the edge of the eyelashes, and then continues by hitting the cheek. So kind of put yourself wherever that reflective light is and look around and see what's lighting me up. This part you can see is kind of a white color or a lighter tone, lighter value, and this is being lit up by her white dress that's hitting the sun. Okay. Okay, so here's another one of my daughter on the beach, as you saw earlier. But on this one, I do want to explain what this is in here. So on the face, you can see that a lot of the top of the face has that blue from this blue sky. So that's reflecting on her forehead as the head goes around the top. And then here you can see some highlights as well as under the nose that's coming from her white shirt, as well as down on the ground, you've got all this sand. So all this, along with her white shirt, is reflecting up to light up this section of her face. You can see how around this section, due to her sunburn or whatever, as well as the blue sky, it's kind of a purple tone. Her eyes are in shadow. But then you work down to her arm, and you can see the back of her arm again is lit up, but this is more of a yellow tone. That's strictly from the sand. And then you have some white coming through from the sun right here. And then as you work your way down, you can kind of see, and I do want to mention again, with this one as well, this blue is much more strong than it really was. So it's just doing that artist choice to do what you want to embellish some of the colors. And then you have some of the sun coming through the dress down here. But this whole thing down on the bottom is just shadow. So it's just the shadow from her. This is lit up because of the reflected light from the sky. Even when you look at some of the grass here, you've got reflected light in some of these shadowed side, the shadowed side of the grass here. And then that's coming through on the reflection of the ground, where this is just the blue sky again. Okay. And now let's go to the last one. Okay, so this is another painting that I just wanted to show you because this one has a sun setting, or almost set. But when I did this, it was such a beautiful scene because of the warmth hitting this side of her head and yet the coolness of the blue sky hitting this side. So the sun was so bright that you can see you can barely make out the details of this hair because of that strength of the light. And so kind of blur things off, let it glow. But because this was blonde hair, kind of that warm tone, as it came through, it was lit by the sun on one side, so the other side was more of a warm tone. Also, because it was reflecting off the skin, so it was bouncing back to have more of that warm tone. As you see on the forehead up here, it's warm on this side, again, because it's being blocked by that hair. So you have warmth on this side of the skull, the forehead, and then this part did not see the sunlight, but it was lit up by, of course, the blue sky. So that blue sky reflecting or mixing with that skin color creates this tone. And then as it curves around, it goes back under the hair and becomes warm again. But you can see this side of the hair, because this side does not see the sun, it's only lit up by what's above it, which again is that blue sky. So always look for what's lighting that particular part up. And then down here, oh, actually, so the butterfly, things that are translucent, for instance, like this butterfly, the sun's so strong it's hitting this side, which will be whiter than the under part of the wing. So just a tad value difference. Also, this value is going to be picked up a little bit on that blue reflecting up under that side. So I don't see it as much here. Let me go back to the top. So on the face, notice that where the light hits, the sun hits, there's a little bit of this orange glow. You can see it down here also. So this is another form of reflective light called subsurface scattering. So I want to go into that a little bit. Okay, so subsurface scattering happens whenever any strong light hits human skin. And because the human skin is somewhat translucent, the light goes through the skin and it lights up that blood, which of course makes that blood glow. And when liquid glows, it doesn't stop at the shadow. It fades into the shadow. So let's look at an example of this. So I'm sure you've all seen how when the sun hits certain waters, it can become all beautiful shades of blues and greens. But in this case, when there's a cave, the sun stops at the cave. It doesn't go into the cave because the cave is in shadow. But that water that goes in the cave continues to glow and slowly dims into the darkness. And this is the same thing that the human blood does. When light hits it, strong light or sun, it's going to glow past that terminator line, past that shadow line, to where it lights up the skin in that shadow, which is why you get that red glow along that terminator line. So where does reflected light occur? Reflective light occurs when light hits one object, bounces off, and illuminates another object, but it illuminates it in a much dimmer level. Not the second light, it's a reflective light, so it has to be dimmer or at a lower value than the light source that it's hitting. So here's 5 important things to remember. Number 1, so reflected light usually shows up in shadows or near a shadow edge. The biggest mistake artists make is they'll make that reflective light just as bright as the actual reflected light source, which it must be darker. Nothing inside a shadow should become lighter than the light source side of that object, meaning on the light side of that terminator line, it can't be brighter or as bright as any of those values. 3, the value of that reflective light can't change when or if you add color to it. And number 4, this mistake is pretty common. They'll make the reflected light too wide. And depending on its shape, if it's a round cheek, for instance, it actually only occupies a narrow portion of that shadow. And number 5, they paint the shadow the same temperature. So look for other reflected light in that scene that may be reflected from another source. Whether it's warm light or cool light, those changes can make a difference in your painting. So reflected light isn't always obvious. It always depends on the surface color, the surface value, the texture of that surface, and the surface distance, and the strength of that light. So when don't you paint reflected light? So you don't want to paint reflected light on an object that is far away from the source or super absorbent, like a cable knit sweater or something. Anything with deep crevices, it can only go so far. Okay, so next, you can't do a reflective light or highlight and shadow video without having the white sphere, the white ball. And so I just thought I'd be a little bit different and use a white head instead. But I think that would help with seeing how light reflects up under the eyes, under the nose and lip and so on. So with this, we can see the highlight here and here. We have the center light, which is a little bit dimmer, more the color of the object, as well as the halftone. We're slowly working toward the darkest part of the light side. And then we have the terminator line, and then the form shadow, which is like the average value of that shadow side. Then, of course, we have reflected light as it comes on here. So you can see how it's reflecting and changing that value a little bit to be a little bit brighter, but never as bright as any part of the light side of that terminator line. Okay, now I'm just going to throw a couple colors up here so you can kind of see what happens. You can see up here under the eyebrow, you have some red reflecting up there. This is when it's a shirt or a jacket, something lower than the head. But it goes up under the nostril on the right side of the cheek. Definitely bright under the neck or under the chin and the neck. But still, none of this is as bright as the darkest side of the light side of that terminator line. I also want to let you know, or make sure you know, reflective light doesn't hit in the light. It, for the most part, only hits in shadow, as you see here. That red is just reflecting in shadow parts, not in highlight, for the most part, as I said. And then just a lighter one here so you can see it's the same thing, but even with a light color, it's still not as bright as the dark sides of the light. Okay, now let me take you outside real quick. Okay, so out here, you can see the sun setting now, so I wanted to get a view of this. So you can see where the highlights are. This is the setting sun over the field over here, and it's hitting the side of this styrofoam head, which you can see the highlight marks, and then it turns yellowish orange, and then that terminator line where it switches over to the shadow side. But this blue sky here is what's reflecting on the side of the head, and you can see in the middle there's a little bit of a darker area there at that terminator line or core shadow, but this is actually the tree right above us. So if I move this over here into the away from the tree or the tree line, then you can see how it's just completely blue on the right side from the sky, and then the left side is the orange or warmer side. So sometimes you'll hear artists say that it should be darker at that terminator line, but it's actually just a optical illusion. It's not really something that occurs. So you can embellish it in a painting because this is just straight blue sky coming down on top. So there's no way it's going to be darker. But you can embellish it just to make it a more noticeable change from light to shadow, and that would be perfectly fine. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope you gathered something from it. Reflective light is a great thing to get used to, especially as an artist. You kind of want to look around and see different things and take in, why is that being lit up that color, you know, and how is it being lit up? So many times, whether it's an incandescent light indoors or whether it's outside, colors that are not being lit up by the source, you need to know what they're being lit up by, because that's going to help you to determine what colors are going to be added into that reflected light. So if you enjoyed this, please click the like button and definitely subscribe. Until next time, everyone, God bless.